So welcome everybody, and thank you for participating in today's OA Alliance webinar, which will focus on Indigenous leadership and tribal treaty rights in the context of ocean acidification and ocean and climate management strategies. My name is Jessie Turner, and I'm the project manager of the OA Alliance, and will be facilitating today's webinar. And so just a couple things to note before we get started. Please go ahead and mute your lines. If you are not a presenter.
So Jesse?
Yes.
Can I interrupt here? I don't know if somebody doesn't have their phone on mute, but there's a lot of ruffling going on when you're speaking.
Let me So if you are not a presenter, go ahead and mute your lines. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, I think we got that. Great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and quickly run through the list of participants that we're going to have today on the line, just to give you a sense of who's tuning in here today. And we won't go around the horn, so I'll just go ahead and quickly run through the list of participants. So joining us today, we have representatives of the following governments: the states of California, Oregon, Washington, and Maine, the provincial government of British Columbia and Canada, the national governments of Netherlands, New Zealand, Canada, along with the Gullah-Geechee Nation, Makah Tribe, Suquamish Tribe, Sitka Tribe of Alaska, the Sun'aq Tribe of Kodiak, and possibly very early in the morning, the Ngati Kuri Iwi in New Zealand. We also have representatives from the following affiliate members and partners with us today: the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, Ocean Foundation, Monterey Bay Aquarium, U.S. Climate Advisors, California Ocean Protection Council, Ocean Networks Canada, Alaska OA Network, Small Scale OA, the Native American Indian Rights Fund, University of Washington OA Center, and Olympic Coast Marine Sanctuaries. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. Please go ahead and note that we will be recording this webinar for our government and affiliate members that are interested in joining, but we're located in time zones that were hard to make work for this particular connection. And so for those new partners on the line, we're just going to go ahead and give a pretty brief overview of the OA Alliance goals and outcomes, but I'll try to make it short and sweet because we've got a lot of great presentations to get to today. So launched in 2016 by the 4 West Coast jurisdictions of Washington, California, Oregon, and the province of British Columbia, the OA Alliance now brings together a diversity of governments and non-government actors across the globe to highlight and take action on ocean acidification. Since its launch, we have grown to about over 80 members now, and we are still growing. So the OA Alliance calls for the creation of OA action plans by member governments and interested affiliate members that will do 5 major things. The first is to advance scientific understanding, to reduce causes of acidification, to protect the environment and coastal communities from impacts of a changing ocean, to expand public awareness and sustain international support for addressing this global problem. OA action plans are meant to describe real, tangible actions that governments and affiliate members will take or are taking to respond to the threat of acidification. Core outcomes of the Alliance include the advancement of OA action plans, elevating OA within international and domestic climate agreements and other relevant frameworks, and building a diverse coalition calling for actions. So it is our intention for today's webinar is to feature and share information across OA Alliance membership and partners, specifically to describe how some tribal governments of the OA Alliance are approaching this work. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And for speakers, go ahead and remember to unmute yourself. Andrea, I'm going to go ahead and pull up your slides here. Just give me a quick moment. Okay. And Andrea, if you can hear me, do you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself, and I'll go ahead and get your slides started?
Yes, thank you, and good morning, good evening. I realize we're all in different time zones. I happen to be in Tucson, Arizona, which is where my tribe is based on the U.S. side of the border. I'm from the Yaqui Indian Nation. I'm also the executive director of the International Indian Treaty Council, which was the first Indigenous organization to be recognized with consultative status at the United Nations Economic and Social Council way back in 1977. We're actually founded in Standing Rock, on the Standing Rock Reservation in 1974. And now we represent Indigenous peoples from 5 different regions, all the way from the Arctic to South America, Pacific Islands, and Caribbean Islands. So it's very important for our affiliates. And as my last slide will show, you know, not just coastal and island peoples are from ocean ecosystems. The whole planet is an ocean ecosystem, even those of us who have part of our territory in the desert. So thank you, and just let me know when to start. I'm on the phone here because of computer problems, so you'll have to guide. You'll be my eyes, Jesse. Okay.
I got
Let
you.
me know when to begin.
You are all set. Your first slide is up. You go ahead.
Thank you very much. I titled the presentation "Our Ways of Knowing and Our Ways of Being" because that speaks more directly to what most people tend to call, and is called at the United Nations at UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, traditional knowledge. But it speaks better than traditional knowledge, because traditional knowledge seems sometimes to people like a thing that's already formed, and there it is. But the reason Indigenous peoples are engaged in adapting and mitigating climate change is there's a constant relationship between Indigenous peoples, our ceremonies, our identities, our traditional foods, and our ecosystems. And it's a circular relationship that continues to build as we move forward. So this is a picture also of part of what we do is bringing Indigenous peoples from different nations together. This is our first International Salmon Conference that was in 2014 at the Klamath River in California, and it has Indigenous representatives from Alaska, from Aotearoa, New Zealand, British Columbia, Canada, and California, talking about the threats like climate change. Next slide. It's important for us in the work that we do, and I am going to be talking about the new facilitative working group and the local communities and Indigenous peoples platform that's going to have its first meeting here starting Friday of this week in Bonn, Germany. But that we as Indigenous peoples come into this discussion not just with a cultural and spiritual foundation, but also a rights-based approach. And this, of course, is a quote from the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, recognizing food, health, and well-being to be human rights. The next slide also affirms the rights that are reaffirmed and recognized in treaties, and I know we're going to be speaking more about that, but it's really important that the treaty right to food is affirmed in many of our nation-to-nation treaties that we consider in U.S., Canada, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and many other places to be legally binding international instruments, the same as the conventions and covenants are. The next slide, of course, is Article 1 in common of the International Covenants on Civil, Political Rights and Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights that affirms that in no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. And all of these are rights that are impacted by climate change, but also we feel the assertion and recognition of these rights is part of the key to our global survival, not just us, but the rest of the peoples on the planet. The next slide, shows the adoption of the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the 30-year span between when Indigenous peoples first began marching in. Many of our founders are there in the front row in 1977 to the adoption of the UN Declaration. And I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but it's a fundamental basis for the work that we're doing with the UNFCCC on climate change. First of all, to affirm the next slide, the UN Declaration is the minimum standard, both for UN agencies, for states, and for every level of interaction for Indigenous peoples with settler governments and other governments, including with each other. The UN Declaration affirms our rights to our traditional lands and resources. Article 26. Next slide, and I'm going to clip through this quickly. I know you all have your bedside or purse-sized copy of the UN Declaration and can refer to it in more detail. Article 25, the next slide, is particularly important to this discussion because it speaks to how indigenous that UN document is. It talks about the spiritual relationship with our traditional lands and resources, but also our right to uphold our responsibilities to our future generations in this regard. It's a lot of people's favorite article of the Declaration, but it really is the foundation also for the work we're doing on climate change at the UN. Article 20, next slide, affirms our right to subsistence in our traditional economies. I like these pictures. This, of course, is an elder from Alaska, you know, working on muktuk, whale meat. You know, the pictures speak to, I think, you know, speak to your heart as well as the words. Article 24 affirms our right to our traditional health practices, including conservation of medicinal plants and animals. Next slide, Article 29 affirms the environmental protection and productive capacity of our lands. And all of these are rights that are being currently threatened, of course, by climate change. It's not only its impacts, but its causes. Article 32 affirms our right to free, prior, informed consent and development. It could be seen as a solution if it was respected. This marches against the Keystone Pipeline. And one that we refer to a lot in the work at the UN, the next slide, is Article 31, our right to maintain, control, protect, and develop our cultural heritage and traditional knowledge. Just really quickly, you know, some of the ways that climate change is threatening. Next slide. First, this is my only slide showing the cause of climate change. You know, this is the tar sands and the effect immediately on the children in Fort Chipewyan, but also, of course, it has a global impact. Next slide, and others may be speaking to this in more detail, but it's really important that when we went into Paris, one of our commitments was to join with the small island states and others and indigenous peoples around the world in calling for a goal of no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade in global temperature. The studies, which are well known, you know, basically say with more than that, indigenous peoples' ways of life are seriously threatened and undermined. But we found out last year at COP24 in Katowice that emissions had actually increased in the last year with a predicted 3 degree increase, and our Sami and Inuit colleagues are saying that would mean 9 degrees in the Arctic. Well, I know we have salmon people on the line, but you know, this is one of the examples we took to COP21 in Paris, that year on the Columbia River, about 80% of the salmon return of the cohos had died through skin lesions caused by the warmer water. I know they have some solutions. I'll let my colleague speak to those, but this is recognized by the United Nations as a major threat to food security. And the species that are facing extinction, 1 million, they say now. Among those are core culturally and nutritionally important foods like salmon. This is the threat to extinction of the salmon in California, the Central Valley of California, predicted for the end of the century. Mexico, I just want to show a picture of our territory in northern Mexico, which of course extends into southern Arizona, the Sonora Desert. The red areas are areas which today are dramatically impacted negatively for being able to produce corn, which is the core spiritual and nutritional foods for many indigenous people. Next slide. This is what you're going to be talking about with far more expertise than I am, but ocean acidification directly affects the indigenous peoples as well as their entire ecosystems that are dependent on shellfish and seafood. And you know the details better than I, but it says, you know, that the rate that it's acidifying now, the shell of common shellfishes dissolve in 45 days. Extreme weather events. Next slide. This is, of course, the Hurricane Maria and Borinquen. Many of our Taino communities there that are affiliates of ours are still going without electricity and have not received aid. The rising sea levels and relocation of indigenous peoples in the Pacific and the coastal Alaska and many other places as a result. And some of the solutions we're looking at is protecting cultural practices and sacred places in coastal areas. For example, scientists say that the Tule marshes, where a lot of the culturally important areas are in California, but also sacred sites and shell mounds absorb more than 10 times the carbon that a pine forest does. So there's a direct tie between indigenous peoples, cultural protections and cultural rights, and actually prevention of climate change. This is the next slide is the Maori marine management for health. The indigenous peoples are measuring the health of their traditional foods and taking measures to, help to repopulate those areas. I was on this boat. It was beautiful. It's incredible. Restoring ecosystems. This is Pele Island, Vanuatu. Many indigenous peoples are replanting, including in the central United States, their traditional grasslands to prevent erosion. And of course, very key, elders teaching our new generations about hunting, gathering, fishing, and our traditional relationships with those things and how they're changing as a result of climate change. And I want to emphasize the next slide, that our elders have been saying for a long time that we need to leave fossil fuels in the ground. This is a quote from Roberta Black's. Coal is the liver of Mother Earth. It has to stay in the ground so she can be healthy. It's a very profound statement, and we can talk more about that if you would like to know what she means by that. When we went in, and I'm just reaching the end and the development of the facilitative working group, what we took to Paris was actually the results of 7 consultations we had in North America with about, through traditional leadership, 318,000 indigenous individuals from US and Canada responded. And 96% affirmed that their own people's traditional knowledge and practices can be useful in addressing or responding to climate change. We took that into COP21. The next is a picture of us there. And we really had to go to the mat there to get what we got. We had protests, caucus meetings of all the different regions, about 200 indigenous peoples. And we were able to implement the language in there for 1.5 degrees. Next slide. We were actually able, for the first time in history, to get human rights and rights to indigenous peoples included in legally binding environmental treaties. That was very difficult and challenging, but that's in the preamble. We are also able to have indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge. Next slide. And the call for establishment of an exchange or traditional knowledge platform put into place in Paris. We had over 3 years consultations with states. These are pictures of 2 of them. Indigenous peoples from around the world came together. This is Ottawa, Canada in 2017, and just last October in Cochabamba, Bolivia, where we hashed out some real difficult stumbling blocks with states. And we also spoke to indigenous peoples about this. What are their criteria? What is the criteria of our traditional knowledge holders and practitioners on the ground and spiritual leaders? And of course, they affirm the need to have our rights be respected, our knowledge be respected, but that also states need to keep their commitments to keep emissions down and keep the global temperature range increase under control, which they're not doing. Just in December last year, we won the big victory in Katowice at COP24, and the platform was adopted. This is a picture. I've never seen one like this before, where the state and the indigenous peoples close together for a picture of the achievement that we made. And some real key elements is equal participation with indigenous peoples and selection by the indigenous peoples themselves of their 7 representatives. And I think you know that I was the representative selected by North America to be on the facilitative working group. and that the platform and the work on the platform will respect the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples in its entirety. And just to conclude, I want to reaffirm that we're all from an ocean ecosystem. We need to think about oceans in that way. And there's a mom baby and an ocean in the background. And thank you very, very much.
That was absolutely fantastic, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining. We know that you are getting ready to go to Bonn for the first working group of the platform, and it's just a delight to have you present to our group and our membership, so thank you. Any questions?
Well, thank you for asking me.
Oh, of course. We look forward to continuing our partnership with you. Any questions for Andrea while I change the slides over to the next speaker? And please note you are probably on mute, so you might have to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question. And I'll go ahead and pull up the slides for our next speaker from the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. Okay. Great. So just to remind you, if you are not on mute, please go ahead and mute yourself. And we'll go ahead and get ready for the next speaker. Justin Hunter, can you hear me okay? Justin Hunter, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's better.
Gotcha, sorry. Okay, great. So let's go ahead. Again, thank you, Andrea, for that excellent presentation. I think that's a really high-level overview from the international coordinating space. And so it's great to go ahead now and sort of take this application a little bit more localized to coordinating what that means for the treaty tribes in Washington State. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Justin, and I'll get your slides up right now. And again, please go ahead and mute yourself if you are not already. And Justin, for time, to make sure we have time for all the presenters, I'll go ahead and put a hard stop at 10 minutes, and I'll let you know about 2 minutes until when that is, if that's all right.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, I'm going to move through some of these pretty quickly, especially early on. But I'm Justin Parker. I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. Good day to everybody, whatever time zone you're in. I'm going to be talking about our protection of tribal treaty rights. Next slide, please. And so the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission, we're comprised of the 20 Western Washington treaty tribes, as you see by this map, basically from the Cascade Mountains out to the Pacific Ocean, down to almost the Columbia River, not quite into the Columbia River, goes down as far as the Chehalis Basin. Next slide, please. And myself, I'm from Makah, and I was in the upper corner there. Apologize about that, but that's where I'm from. The Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission is based out of Olympia with a few satellite offices. We do have 5 tribes that are currently part of the OA Alliance: the Makah, Nisqually, Quileute, Suquamish tribes, and Quinault Indian Nation. Next slide, please. Each of our member tribes is any federally recognized Indian tribe are sovereign nations. And what essentially this means is that tribes have the right to self-govern, they have the right to find their membership, they have the right to manage their tribal property, their business and domestic relations. And then this last component is something that we get heavily involved in, not directly, but because it's the tribes as the governments. They have a government-government relationship with the federal government, but when we get requested by our tribes to provide assistance, whether it be in a collective group or with an individual tribe, we help them where we can in natural resources, environmental issues. Next slide, please. Each of our member tribes are party to 5 different treaties, otherwise known as Stevens Treaties, which were signed in 1854 and 1855. We have the Treaty of Medicine Creek, Nia Bay, Olympia, Point Elliott, and Point No Point. Next slide, please. One component, talking about the U.S. Constitution, and this is a very important piece that comes into play with our treaties, and especially when they get litigated or whenever we have issues with the federal government. This gets used a lot. The Constitution of the United States and all treaties made are which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. And that's important note, and I'll come back to that as well as a few slides down the road. Next slide, please. So what was promised in these treaties? So as I mentioned, the tribes are all in Western Washington. That was traditionally our homelands, and then we were free to move and roam all up and down, hunt, fish, gather in that whole area that we know as Western Washington. But what it did in exchange for land, what we know as Western Washington now, we reserved certain rights, and that was for reservations. So you have the reservation areas that were in that map, but we also reserved our right to fish, hunt, and gather. And this last bullet point on this is really key when it comes to our treaties, and ultimately when it comes to litigation, that we've used this. The right to take and fish at all usual and accustomed grounds and stations is further secured to set Indians in common with all citizens of the territory. That was back when Washington was a territory. Next slide, please. The fish wars. So fast forward from 1854 to 1855, we get to the mid-1900s, and this picture really depicts a lot of what happened back in the 1960s and 70s. This photo here has two state law enforcement officers that were trying to arrest a native fisherwoman for what they considered illegal fishing outside of their reservation boundary. And so they're trying to arrest her, they're trying to confiscate her boat, her net, her catch. Next slide, please. And the reason she was put in that predicament was because the state at the time refused to recognize treaty reserve rights, and they're arresting tribal members that were fishing off reservation. And basically, in this lady's case, her husband was actually sitting in the Thurston County Jail because he was exercising his treaty right. And that picture, I think, captures a lot of what happened during what we call the fish wars of the 60s and 70s. And so there was a number of protests, there was a number of fish-ins. We had, different celebrities that came in and helped us with our cause. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the only recourse for tribes is to seek legal remedy. And if you move to the next slide, as I segue into that next slide, and what got the U.S.'s attention that ultimately led to the U.S. versus Bull was when we had the Attorney General from the United States show up at one of these fish-ins, and he was there when they got gassed by the state law enforcement officials, and so that's what brought the U.S. into this litigation with the tribes. And basically, this U.S.B. versus Washington, otherwise known as the Bull decision, which was handed down in February of '74 and ratified by the Supreme Court in '79, basically had two components to it. The tribes have the right to fish in all usual and custom places, which is what I highlighted in the treaty language. And the second one is established the tribes as co-managers of the resource and entitled to 50% or half of the harvestable fish returned to Washington waters. Next slide, please. And immediately following the court decision, our tribes formed the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. So we are an intertribal organization. We're basically a quasi-government, if you will, from the tribes, and we take our policy and direction at the request of our tribes and where they want to move things. And so we have a particular role that we play. We are not a sovereign government. We are an intertribal organization. So I just want to make sure that's clear. And I'm just going to cover 5 elements here quickly. There's a little bit more, but basically some of our main roles and purposes that we serve is we provide technical and support services. We serve as a clearinghouse for information. We do a lot of information education that goes into putting out your communications. There's a lot of data that comes into play. And we act as a forum to express and communicate and try and resolve some of the issues that are identified by our member tribes as they bring them to the table. Next slide, please. We also ensure that tribal leaders are well represented by encouraging a broad understanding of tribal cultures, practices, traditions, relative to the tribe's right and interest in fishing and hunting and gathering. We also, this last point is very, very much key as it was when we were created. We helped forge relationships that maximize the strength of the tribes and enable the commission and our member tribes to speak in a unified voice. And that is as relevant today as it has ever been. Next slide, please. So what is our role in the OA Alliance? So we joined as an affiliate member in 2017. Earlier this year, our tribes made a decision to approve John Idis, chairman of Makah Tribe, my tribe, to serve on the OA Alliance Executive Committee. He's supported by not only his staff out at Makah, but also the commission staff here. and John or Katie's going to be giving a presentation next here down in the agenda. We also assist our tribes with our communications through our Tribal Climate Change Forum, and that's something that our climate scientist, Eliza, who's on in here with me, is a part of and coordinates those efforts. Next slide, please. So some of the efforts that we currently have with the ocean acidification is we developed a plan and approved it just a few months ago. We're currently working on how best to implement that now. We also have a marine resource resilience project that was just started not quite a year ago. It's monitoring and planning around ocean conditions. That's led by our new oceanographer, which is a new position that we created out in our coastal office. We also have a report that we put out on climate change and natural resources that identified our climate impacts and our OA impacts relative to our tribal rights perspective. And anybody needs a copy of that report, we'd be willing to give you the link or even provide hard copies. Next slide, please. So as we make that shift, I guess, from ocean acidification, but the other issues that we deal with in primary a lot in regards to habitat, but in the broader sense, we also have, you know, the more poor ocean conditions that we deal with on a constant basis. Climate change, obviously, you heard in the last presentation, as well as the habitat degradation. Those are really big, significant factors that threaten our ways of life. And then there's habitat degradation is a real direct correlation with that and the decline of our salmon stocks, as well as the southern resident killer whale, which has been getting a lot of play in the news and the media for the past year and a half. Our tribes published a report back in 2012, another version in 2016, and we're currently working on one right now, working with our 20-member tribes, and each of them have a chapter for their watersheds, and that's our State of the Watersheds report, and that basically established the habitat indicators that identifies areas where we've made progress or where things got worse. In a lot of cases, our habitat has continued to get worse since that 2012 benchmark, and we can clearly state and point out the areas where that's happened. There has been some successes, but unfortunately, we're still going backwards in our habitat. Next slide. And for us, it all comes back to our treaty rights, and this is something that, in order for us to practice our treaty rights, it becomes a problem for us because it's being rendered meaningless because of the loss of salmon and the ability to harvest. And in July of 2011, we brought our treaty rights at risk initiative back to the White House, and basically we're seeking three things out of that. And that was to coordinate the federal leadership, align the federal programs, and to hold the disparate application of salmon conservation measures. The federal government, as I mentioned, our treaty rights and the earlier slides, we're trying to get them to implement their trust obligations so that they exercise this in a responsible manner to the tribes and also to the recovery of salmon and ultimately this southern resident killer whale. And for us, salmon recovery begins and ends with good habitat. Our natural production as well as our hatchery production need good habitat. Next slide, please. So treaty rights at risk from the OA perspective is this next slide, and I'm going to go back to the treaty fishing rights as it's characterized in our treaties, and that's we're a place base, which means fishermen can only fish in their tribes, usually on custom fishing areas, which is used as establishment to the USV Washington full decision as we know it. So if we have bad fishing conditions on the ocean, it's not as simple as Quinaultli, Ho, or Makah being able to move in sound and fish, and we can't move around like some of the recreational fishermen can because of that place-based component. And so the results of this ocean acidification, not only they felt locally, but we also has a global aspect to it, and that's the response that we need for the critical long-term resolve for that. And so our engagement in the OA Alliance is part of that approach, and we will do what we can, and we'll collaborate where we can and work with people where we can to protect our treaty rights and our traditional ways of life. And I'll just conclude with the next slide and just want to point out our long-term chairman, Billy Frank Jr., who passed away a little over 5 years ago. One of his quotes that people are probably familiar with, as the salmon disappear, so do our tribal cultures and treaty rights. We are at a crossroads and we are running out of time. And I will just leave it at that. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. topics matter.
Justin, thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation, and we're so grateful for our partnership with the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission and for you. And apologies, I called you Justin Hunter. Of course, I know your last name is Parker, and I just get nervous and my brain gets scrambled when I'm hosting. So, so thank you. Any questions for Justin on the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission before we move to our next speaker? And please remember, you might be on mute if you'd like to ask a question.
Easy crowd, I guess.
Yeah, I might have accidentally muted people, we'll see. But thank you very much, Justin, that's great. And really, again, looking forward to our ongoing partnership with the Commission. Excellent. So our next speaker is speaking to us from British Columbia this morning and is going to talk a little bit about a new network called the LEO Network that was commissioned out of Alaska by the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that effort is and possibly how to plug in. And then we'll move to Katie Rubel with the Makah Tribe and talking about Makah Tribe's perspective. And then we'll close with a couple remarks from a colleague in Alaska, the Sun'aq Tribe in Kodiak. So we might go maybe 5 minutes over. That's pretty hard for the course for us, so please do stick around, and we appreciate you attending today. So Tom, can you hear me okay? Let's see, Tom Oaken, can you hear me all right?
Yes, thanks, Jesse. How's my audio?
Your audio is good. I'm just going to go mute a couple folks I'm hearing a little bit of feedback from.
Okay.
Okay. And I think you're good. So again, I'll give a quick warning of 10 minutes tops if we can get there, and then I'll go ahead and give you a little warning if we feel like we're pushing it. But I'll go ahead and get your presentation up and take it away. Please feel encouraged to introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, Jesse, and thank you to the two previous speakers. Excellent presentations, educational for me. Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity of sharing with you a really exciting new tool and platform that really will helps us understand the changes that are happening that are observable in our environment, and integrating indigenous knowledge with local knowledge and scientific knowledge. And so I think you might find it pretty useful and interesting, and I'll tell you about it. So again, as Jesse said, it is was developed by a colleague of mine from the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium with close collaboration with tribal communities that are distributed throughout Alaska. And it is a network of people and a platform for anyone to share observations of unusual environmental changes and integrating different dimensions of knowledge. And so the previous slide showed a distribution of points of observations and also news articles. There's another layer that integrates scientific papers as well. So this is just showing that there are communities throughout North America that have at least one individual who is in the LEO network. There's over 700 communities. And one of the things that I wanted to show here was that the power of this observation network is that it really covers whole landscapes, goes across landscapes as compared with monitoring stations, more rigorous scientific quantitative monitoring stations that don't necessarily cover whole landscapes. One of the things that reason it's powerful, but another is the depth of stories and knowledge that can be shared and conveyed with deeper knowledge of place-based knowledge. So next slide, please. And these slides also show the concentrations along coastlines as well. And this is just showing the distribution that is a growing global network across the whole world. So next slide. Thanks. Yeah, so I said it's a network of people. This is just showing a couple of workshops that we had. But really the LEO network is is essentially an online talking circle where we share our stories and observations of local environmental change, and to communicate those, but also to for everyone involved to learn more about why these particular changes are happening. So there's over 3,000 members now, and over 1,000 organizations affiliated with those members who are in the LEO network. And so it's a powerful search interfaces, such as the members database here, where you can search for members in your local area and the observations that they've made. But also you can search for people who have similar interests on particular topics, or et cetera. And this is also showing the three dimensions of knowledge that people self-nominate as and bring to the LEO network. So next slide, please. And this is also showing that the distribution of those dimensions of knowledge in the LEO network, and the distribution of interests and expertise in the middle here, that frequency histogram there, showing that certain kinds of observations are more frequent: waters, land, weather, fish, ocean and sea, plants, seasons, land mammals, etc., than other kinds of observations. But those biases just relate to where, to some extent, where the LEO network has been implemented. So it was developed, as I said, by my colleagues in Alaska, the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, and it's sort of growing from there. I'm implementing it in British Columbia as a contractor to the First Nations Health Authority in British Columbia. And I'm not speaking for either organization, just showing you as a user what the power of this is. So as I said, there are three dimensions of knowledge that the system integrates in a pretty powerful and exciting way. So next slide. And essentially, the observations that people share on the LEO network are the things that really matter locally to people. So that's different. It's sort of a different way of approaching understanding the health of a particular area. So the other approach is more sort of a systematic scientific approach, where you would identify particular indicators that you want to track over time. This is sort of a complementary approach, where the observations that emerge are the things that people really care about in their areas. So this also integrates health, human health, and environment through the One Health approach. Jesse, I think someone's got their.
Goodness.
I don't know if other.
Oh no.
Okay, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, yeah, the One Health approach is the philosophy behind the LEO network, where the health of the environment is the same as the health of people. And so that's where the LEO network is coming from. Next slide, please. And this is just the distribution of the observations and the stories across the world right now, just showing you where it's been implemented, just a heat map. And next slide. And then you can sort of search for the marine related or the coastal marine observations on the LEO network system, which is growing. Okay, next slide.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. So just a few minutes left here. I think this is just an example of the one observation, so the architecture of an observation that you can make on the LEO network. And this is a simple one. So Jimmy Evac from Utkavik, which is Barrow, Alaska, has basically shared an observation by Jonas Oxholk about a sea lion sighting way north of where you would normally see them. And so this is, on the left, it's just showing the distribution of observations that you might search for, let's say marine mammal observations. And then there's a thumbnail that you can click into and essentially see this kind of observation. It's got particular specific coordinates some other information linked with Wikipedia, and a suggested reference, sort of citable reference for this. But essentially, this observation is one paragraph describing that they saw this stellar sea lion, and some comments from Leo editors. Next slide. And then they took a picture of this stellar sea lion, so that's the individual, and just showing the normal range distribution map, showing that the stellar sea lion is way north of where it would normally be, and Barrow is right at the very tippy top of Alaska there, and so the stellar sea lion is hundreds of miles north of where it would normally be. Okay, next slide. So that's essentially that contribution, that observation. But observations can be more, have much more information in them. So this is Ryan Brubaker working with Stephen Payton. So Stephen is from the Seldovia Village Tribe, and Ryan is a high school student, or was a high school student when he and Stephen made this observation. And Ryan put together this really neat video, which he attached to this observation. And go to Leo Network at leonetwork.org to see these observations. They're really fantastic. And then added photos. This observation is part of some projects that been related observations. You see there's a number of collaborators on this particular observation. So people from federal and state agencies and universities are contributing information and their stories and knowledge and interpretation to this particular observation of pink salmon die-off in Jackaloff Creek, because there wasn't enough snowpack that year, not enough snow melt, and not enough water for the pink salmon when the tide went out, essentially stranding them. And so it's a very interesting observation, and the Leo Network is full of these. Next.
Thanks, Tom. And I'll just throw in here the maybe 1.5 minute warning.
Okay, great. This is just an example of some research tools, project maps that you can use. One is Sargassum in the Caribbean. These are stories. Those are mostly the news articles. And then the blob on the right there is mostly individual first-person observations related to this North Pacific temperature anomaly that affected a lot of the life coastally. And then the next slide is the one that relates to ocean acidification. So this is a distribution of mostly scientific peer-reviewed journal articles that I dropped into the Leo Network over the weekend. And essentially, so showing that there are these three different layers with information, so you can get into the literature and actually pin the literature across the geography here. Next slide. Integrating all that knowledge. And so this is just showing that we can interface Leo observations, those three layers that I talked about, with outside layers of data as well. So if there's ocean acidification data from, let's say, NOAA, the PMEL, buoys, or whatever the ocean acidification data are, we can interface those data with individual local observations on the Leo Network if you want. Okay, next slide. And this is just showing the link, essentially showing that the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium was the one behind the Leo Network. Again, I don't represent them, but I'm showing their logo here so you can see it. And then mostly funded by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Then some other funders and partners as well. And the logos at the bottom are just the ones that I'm kind of more affiliated with. And so, yeah, so any questions, you can contact me. And thank you very much for time.
Well, thanks so much, Tom, and thanks for continuing on through the ambulance sound, and that's a great presentation. I've had the privilege of hearing you speak about the network now a couple times at different events or conferences, and so I very much encourage folks to check out the Leo Network, to contact Tom directly, or feel free to reach out to me and I can put you in contact with Tom. But I think it's just such a neat tool, and really look forward to seeing it continue to evolve and grow. You know, obviously here in Washington, particularly obviously down the North American Pacific coast, but obviously with an international presence and set of communities. So thank you.
You're welcome, Jesse.
Any questions for Tom while I go ahead and transition to our next speaker, who will be Katie Rubel with the Makah Tribe. So Katie, go ahead and know that you're on deck, but any questions for Tom? Remember, you might be on mute. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Tom. And so I'll go ahead and get Katie, grab your slides and get them all ready. Can you hear me okay?
I think there's some questions on the chat.
Let's see. I know how to do that. Yes. Thank you. Yes, we can send out everyone a link to these observations. And so the question to you, Tom, is what are the plans for data archiving? And how are you connecting this to policymaking and to peer-reviewed research community?
Okay, great, both great questions. So the data on the LEO network is essentially held by the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium in Anchorage at their headquarters, and those data are available because because data that are shared with the LEO network, there is folks essentially agree to share it to the LEO network. So anyone who makes a profile on the LEO network can have access to those data. So it's essentially public, but you have to make a profile and join the LEO network for it. And so it is archived, and so the first-person observations are essentially archived on the LEO network itself, and then the LEO network links to the newspaper articles, which is another layer, and then it links to the sources of the peer-reviewed journal articles. But it holds sort of some metadata for each of those two. And so you can easily link yourself a set of, let's say, peer-reviewed journal articles to the LEO network if for your own research purposes, if you're interested. And so I put together the ocean acidification information. I didn't make it complete for the whole region, but we can continue to work on that further and make it more complete to essentially help to integrate these forms of knowledge. I don't know if that answers the question about archiving, but and then in terms of policy, yes, I want to mention that essentially the LEO network observations, especially the local first-person observations, have had a much, it's been much more powerful than I think they originally envisioned, because what happens when somebody shares an observation of an unusual environmental change, that observation and the observer gets linked to people with other forms of knowledge and other expertise. And all that knowledge is brought together and into sort of a collaborative, so it's a safe place for collaboration, and it becomes a collaborative publication, online publication, if you will, with co-authors. And essentially, then it becomes transparent, because let's say there are federal and state representatives on those particular stories that evolve and publications. Essentially, communities have found that they get a lot of response and action in terms of policy action in responding to particular things that they're concerned about. Let's say it's coastal erosion or some serious issue with salmon runs. Because all these different players have contributed to the story, then essentially there's a lot of transparency, and that translates into political will for policy action.
So, Tom, thanks so much. I'm going to pause the questioning, but that's a great response, and definitely what I wanted to take away from that as well. So that's excellent. I would encourage folks to reach out to Tom directly for questions, but knowing that we're short on time, I want to go ahead and make sure we get to hear from Katie and specifically the Makah Tribe's ocean policy approach. But thank you, Tom, and definitely really appreciate your time and presentation, and look forward to ongoing collaborations with the Leo Network as well.
Likewise, thanks.
Yeah. So Katie, you can hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
If you go up to view, you might be able to get it to full screen.
Gotcha.
On the view tab. Sorry for having PDF.
You got it. Thank you. Okay, so I will quickly turn it over to you. I know we are a little bit running short on time. Traditionally, people have stayed 10 minutes past on these webinars. We have your attention, and we're excited to hear from you. So Katie, go ahead and take it away. And then after Katie's presentation, we're going to get just a quick verbal update from a colleague at the Sun'aq Tribe in Kodiak. So Tom, if you're still on the line, thanks so much for hanging in there, and really look forward to hearing from you as well. So go ahead, Katie, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to try and do this very quickly. So my name is Katie Rubel. I'm the Natural Resource Policy Analyst for the Makah Tribe. Next slide.
Oh gosh. Yes. Okay.
So the Makah Tribe is located at the northwest tip of Washington State, as Justin highlighted in his presentation. And Makah is the only tribe under the 1855 Treaty of Neah Bay. The tribe ceded about 300,000 acres of land to the United States government and reserved the rights to fish, whale, seal, hunt, and gather within their usual and custom areas. And I will note a slight language difference in the Treaty of Neah Bay compared to the other Stevens treaties, in that whaling and sealing were reserved rights. And that the tribe's marine usual and custom area extends about 40 miles offshore and encompasses about 1,500 square miles of marine areas. There are currently about 2,900 registered Makah tribal members, and the Makah identity, culture, and economy are dependent on natural resources, especially from the ocean. Fishing comprises about 50% of the Neah Bay economy. 86% of our households are engaged in fishing. About 2/3 of those households, fishing is the primary occupation. There are key subsistence and ceremonial uses that are ongoing today, and tourism and recreational fisheries are key economic drivers for Neah Bay as well. Next slide. With the importance of the ocean, the Makah Tribal Council developed a Makah Ocean Policy that was finalized in 2017 by resolution. This policy emphasizes the importance of the ocean for the tribe and establishes consultation procedures and expectations for federal and state agencies in meeting their trust responsibility to the tribe. And I think it's important to emphasize that during the treaty negotiations that a tribal leader declared, "I want the sea, that is my country." It was more important for the tribe to reserve access and rights to marine areas and resources during the treaty negotiations. And so this policy really directs our staff to ensure the tribe's treaty rights are protected in state and federal actions with changing conditions. And we do that through ecosystem-based management, utilizing traditional knowledge. And in regards to climate change and changing ocean conditions, we really want to enhance the tribe's ability to anticipate, respond, and adapt to changes in the marine ecosystem. Next slide. And so with our climate change efforts, we've been having a dedicated climate change effort since 2013. We've recently completed our climate impacts assessment last year. And community input has been really essential to all of these efforts. We've had 140 surveys, so about 10% of the Neah Bay population respond to our impact survey to better understand what are the key concerns for our community. We've also heard from our natural resource managers that they really want to have species vulnerability assessments, and we've identified over 100 species that we want to have a series of 2-pagers on to better understand which species might be more resilient and which are more vulnerable to some of the projected changes. We are working to complete a cultural and traditional knowledge assessment utilizing 13 detailed interviews that were conducted, and we are hoping to finalize our climate adaptation and resiliency plan this year, which again, we had another community survey opportunity with about 90 surveys completed so far on what adaptation strategies the tribe should be prioritizing. And we're also working on a carbon mitigation plan. We recently completed an energy audit on 16 of our tribally owned buildings, We got that final report last month, so we're hoping to implement those results in the next year. Next slide. Our climate impact assessment really focuses in on 5 areas: oceans, forests and lands, freshwater, ecosystems, infrastructure, and public health and well-being, with cultural and spiritual impacts being pulled out and woven through all of those, since the culture and ceremonies are tied to specific activities, species, and places. Next slide. Our traditional and local knowledge framework is an iterative process. We are working on utilizing historical baselines, observations, and traditional knowledge to complement the Western science in our impacts and adaptation planning efforts. We really want to use this to identify the critical cultural resources, which we're hearing from the community are not just key fisheries, these larger species, but the base of the food web are being pulled out as concerns from the community. And we want to identify culturally relevant adaptation strategies that fit with the Makah culture. And we're engaging the community throughout this process. And so this is really an iterative process where we're really trying to ground it in traditional local knowledge and community input. Next slide. So community engagement, as I said, we really need to understand what the community is prioritizing, what they're concerned about, and ensure that there's buy-in on these processes. We've had 2 community dinners in 2017 and 18, where we had an impact survey in 2017, an adaptation survey in 2018, the 13 interviews, and we found about 86% of the community is concerned about climate change, and 80% supports the tribe undertaking climate adaptation efforts themselves. And we've been able to pull out key information and education needs through those surveys, and we're developing a speaker series on climate impacts, the first one being on ocean acidification, in which we had Jen Newton, Dick Feely, and others come out and present to the community on ocean acidification and the current status of the research. And we're also developing a series of outreach materials for the community. Next slide. And one of the early results that we found from our 2017 survey on climate impacts that the community is most concerned about just emphasized that we pulled out a couple of options, but also had write-in options, and then these are ranked from extremely concerned to not concerned at all from the community's perspective. And for purposes here, I've grouped very concerned and extremely concerned. So impacts to fisheries, 87% of the Makah community is concerned on climate impacts to fisheries. 81% are concerned about freshwater availability. We have summertime water shortages annually, even though we get about 100 inches of rain. And so that's something that the community is feeling currently. And so the potential for that to worsen with climate impacts is a major concern of the community. And then ocean acidification was the 3rd ranked concern from our community. And so I feel like we're really hitting on the right things with our efforts here. Next slide. And so we are currently in the process of developing an ocean acidification action plan, part of being under the OA Alliance. And so this is still a draft, but just wanted to highlight some of the initial goals and objectives that we've identified so far. You know, we really want to prepare for a full range of ocean acidification risks and impacts as identified in the Makah Ocean Policy. And some of these we're already working on. We're partners with the University of Washington and Washington Sea Grant on this regional vulnerability assessment for the Olympic Coast. And so that project is synthesizing the environmental and biological vulnerability to ocean acidification on the Olympic Coast, but also the social vulnerabilities of the 4 coastal treaty tribes, including Makah. So that is ongoing. We want to enhance monitoring and coordination and drive some of the research questions to make sure that treaty rights and treaty resources are being considered in the research and monitoring that's ongoing off of our coast. We want to reduce the drivers of ocean acidification. We're working locally to do that with implementing the energy audit. And we are recipients of a Diesel Emission Reduction Act grant twice now to change out our fishing fleet engines to have lower emissions. We've also engaged on state legislation and initiatives on carbon pollution and want to continue to work on regional, national, global efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. We also want to enhance natural solutions that could demonstrate the ability to slow or mitigate ocean acidification, so protecting, restoring, and enhancing eelgrass and kelp habitats in nearshore environments, and then really build the resilience of our tribal community to make sure that our tribal members are able to still be out on the water, still being able to exercise their treaty rights is a key consideration for all of this work. We also want to foster community education and literacy on ocean acidification. That was something that was highlighted in our initial survey with the community. There was a desire to learn more about what this is and what the impacts will be, and then continue to engage beyond reservation boundaries and elevate the role of Indigenous voices and treaty rights in these processes. Next slide. So our next steps, we're working to finalize our traditional local knowledge report in the next couple of months. In the next year, I'm hoping to be able to implement the energy audit results on our tribal buildings, and then have an OA action plan and a climate resilience and adaptation plan finalized by the end of this year. And all of these will be integrated into our Makah Ocean Policy Strategic Implementation Plan. Next slide. And so I just want to conclude with some key messages that traditional knowledge is really important to consider in these planning processes. It can complement Western science, but it will be up to each tribe on how to share or include in external processes. Research and monitoring partnerships with tribes can benefit state, federal, and regional efforts. There's, a long history here of local knowledge and a consistent presence in these places, and so it can really benefit some of these larger monitoring efforts. And then it's really essential to include Indigenous peoples and treaty rights in climate adaptation and ocean acidification planning, something that Justin hit on in his presentation, that not every community can relocate or shift resources. There is a significant cultural and spiritual connection to places and species and activities here, and so we need to make sure that our adaptation efforts are culturally relevant for the communities that we're planning for. Next slide. Just acknowledgements, and then I'll take any questions with the next slide. I also have my contact information there too.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. That's such an awesome presentation, and I can't wait to put that on our website for other folks to check out when they are able. Any questions for Katie about Makah Ocean Policy, or specifically the action planning?
I apologize for talking really fast.
Nailed it. Great job, and thank you so much. Let's see, I have one chat. Yep, gotcha. Okay, I'm happy to report everyone that was on the call when you started, Katie, is still on the call, so we got your attention.
Yay.
So thank you so much. That's great, and we just continue to look forward to partnering with the Makah, and are so again grateful for this leadership within the OA Alliance. Great. Okay, well, if folks will permit and have time, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to finally a quick kind of verbal update, no slides part of it, to Tom Lance with the Sun'aq Tribe of Kodiak, who got in touch with me after this webinar was announced and wanted to give a brief overview of some of the work going on in Alaska, specifically the Alaska OA Tribal Monitoring Network that has been taking shape and going as far as weekly sample collection and analysis in partner with some of the other observing networks up in Alaska. So Tom, let me make sure that I haven't muted you, and let's go, and I'll let you close it out and take it away. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much, Jesse. And thank you for the opportunity the International Ocean Acidification Alliance has provided here for us to speak. I am certainly not an expert at any of this. I was fairly new to this process just about a year and a half ago. It turned out that there are several others that have been leading the way early on. And the Alaska Ocean Acidification Network, led by Darcy Dugan, you can all go online and search for the AUS website. We are partnering with those folks as well as with National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration here locally in Kodiak. They were a key player in helping us bring the ability to monitor a carbonate chemistry in the water locally here. I'd also like to mention that the ocean or the Alaska Ocean Acidification Network and the tribal working group is fairly new, and we're only about 4 or 5 members, I believe, at the moment, but quickly growing. I'd like to mention Sun'aq Pride shellfish. They're a native entity. They were one of the early leaders in this. Sitka Tribe of Alaska in their lab, and then several other tribes here on Kodiak. For those of you who don't know, Kodiak Island is the 2nd largest of the U.S. islands, just a little bit smaller than the big island of Hawaii, who we consider to be our sometimes neighbors, and we're only 4,000 miles apart. Kodiak Island is in the northwestern Gulf of Alaska, and it is occupied. The indigenous population here are made up of Alutiiq Sugpiaq natives who primarily settled here 7,000 to 9,000 years ago in the entire the Gulf Rim, as you would say, probably from about Yakutat, Prince William Sound, if you know where that is, where the Exxon Valdez oil spill occurred, over to the edge of the Aleutian Islands here. So Sun'aq Tribe of Kodiak is the largest of the 10 federally recognized tribes here on Kodiak Archipelago. We're the only one that has a full-time staff doing environmental work. Our duty is to be vigilant and protect subsistence resources for tribal citizens. We're very busy, and I guess the key thing we want to mention is that we need to build partnerships and collaborate with others in order to accomplish our common goals. And that's what the goal of the tribal network has been for ocean acidification. Right now here in Kodiak, on the archipelago, there are 4 organizations, 3 tribes, and then a native archipelago, the Kodiak Native Archipelago Association. I'm trying to speak fast and I'm skipping over important words here. They're all involved. Larsen Bay Tribe, Old Harbor, and Yuzinki tribes. They every month do grab samples and then they send them into our local NOAA has a Kodiak lab here, and they have a percolator, which is used for analyzing carbonate chemistry. And one of the challenges is coordinating transportation of the samples, as well as just getting out and collecting them, of course, but also funding. And we have been fortunate to get a little bit of funding through EPA. All of us generally participate in what's called the Indian General Assistance Program. Our quality assurance project plans are still in draft form, but they have allowed us to proceed with a little bit of funding to help pay for some of the analysis. I guess I should probably wrap this up. The main point, as one of my colleagues, I don't know if she's on the line, but I'd like to just say what she said, and this I believe wraps it up well for everybody here. And everything that Katie Werbel said just prior to me talking here is exactly what the map that we're following, the road map that we're following, or the ocean path we're following. And that is that don't be afraid to ask for help. Much can come from partnerships, and we all have our own knowledge and expertise and resources that allow us to accomplish common goals efficiently. And so again, thank you everybody, and let's tackle this now. We're all in this together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tom. I'm so happy to meet your acquaintance and so happy that you were able to join today. And thanks for everyone to hanging on to the end of the 15 minutes past the call, but we've got rapt attention. So thank you. And I really look forward to engaging more through the OA Alliance with your work in Alaska, Tom. So I think the last request I got was to share all of the presenters' emails with everyone who attended this webinar. So I'll go ahead and follow up with that. And that should be in your inbox later today or tomorrow at the latest. We will post this webinar recording on our website, so go ahead and stay tuned for that. and feel free to share it with different partners as you think applicable. And just a big thank you to everyone who joined this morning, everyone who presented. All of this OA Alliance work is really driven by dedicated individuals who are really passionate about this topic and are keen to partner. So we look forward to ongoing work with you as we get into this year, and I'm wishing everyone a really great week. So thank you for joining, and until next time.
Thank you, Jesse.